Hello, and thank you for joining us today at the 2021 Bloomberg Green Summit. My name is Sasha, and I'm very pleased to be here with a formidable group to discuss the need for bold and urgent action on international climate finance. Last week, in honor of Earth Day, President Biden hosted the Leaders' Summit on Climate, where he announced how the US plans to decrease its emissions by 2030, and where he called on major economies to galvanize their efforts to tackle the climate crisis. As we know, climate change is occurring at an unprecedented pace and has significant implications on human and environmental health around the world. Recovering from the pandemic has given us an opportunity to change course on climate action and to adopt sustainable, nature-based solutions. However, when it comes to developing countries, despite generally producing very low levels of emissions, they're disproportionately impacted by climate change, which hits agriculture, fisheries, and tourism industries the hardest. Those very sectors which are key contributors to national income and employment in the developing world and have been further impacted by the pandemic. Now, wealthy countries committed $100 billion a year in international financing towards mitigation and adaptation efforts as part of the Paris Agreement, but have not fully delivered on this promise. However, 2021 is set to be a pivotal year for climate change action, with the G7 summit in June, the G20 summit in October, and of course, COP26 in November. Well, let's discuss the outlook for those summits, as well as the key issues surrounding international climate finance now. I'm delighted to introduce some incredible panelists. I'm joined by Andrea Murillo, Costa Rica's Director of Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment and Energy. Welcome. Manlio de Stefano, it's Italy's Undersecretary of State for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Mwandwe Chileshe, Global Citizen Senior Manager for Food Security, Nutrition and Agriculture. And finally, Monika Froehler, CEO of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Undersecretary de Stefano, maybe I could begin with you. Italy has taken a leadership role in tackling climate change. You're co-president of COP26 and president of the G20. Maybe you could kick us off and tell us why climate action is so important for Italy, and also how, as co-president of COP, Italy will leverage its leadership to promote international climate financing through actions from its own government and also beyond.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to everyone. Let me say that I'm very glad to attend this event today, and I really thank Bloomberg and Global Citizen for inviting me to speak about such relevant matters. It is a big injustice that those who have done the least to cause the climate crisis often suffer more from its effects. With average global temperature already 1 degree above pre-industrial levels, climate-related disasters blight the lives of millions. Since many years, we know that if we don't get global emissions under control within a decade, many parts of our planet will face a terrible future. This is a critical point in our lifetime, but the pandemic has made investment in climate action more difficult, with budgets stretched and public debt growing. Now, the most urgent priority is to ensure quick progress towards a green, sustainable, and inclusive recovery from COVID-19. Enhancing both public and private green finance is a key part of the answer to such challenges. And that's why Italy is being an EU founding member, and in 2021 also G20 president, as you just mentioned, and partner of with the UK for the presidency of COP26. We want to leverage this leadership to set new standards, allowing international climate financing to develop further. As you may know, there are 3 keywords in the Italian G20 presidency: people, planet, and prosperity, in an inclusive and sustainable vision that leaves no one behind. This means also focusing on stepping up support for the most vulnerable countries, in particularly low-income economies. When it comes to finance, I believe the first challenge is quantity. To support developing countries, in 2015, developed countries pledged collectively to mobilize at least 100 billion per year in climate finance between 2020 and 2025. Yet globally, we still have a lot to do to reach the 100 billion goal, which remains a key priority. We also need to make sure there is readily available finance to protect communities with immediate solutions and early warning systems to prevent or repair damage if disaster strikes. Such work is harder to finance, and this is the reason why last December Italy committed 30 million euros to the United Nations Adaptation Fund. Furthermore, we committed to use our shareholding to increase multilateral development banks' climate ambition, asking them to set higher targets for climate finance and ensure their activities align with the Paris Agreement. Italy is a key actor within the EU's established leadership on climate. In the last days, our leading role has been central for achieving a far-reaching European consensus on the main pillars of the future EU climate law. Italy is also actively contributing in fixing the principle of a so-called EU taxonomy on sustainable finance, with the aim to leave no room for greenwashing phenomena connected with the use of fossil fuels and nuclear energy. This is a very important point in the discussion nowadays. We encourage the start of virtuous competition across major global economies, and obviously our target is to reach the climate neutrality by 2050. This is a major issue we have to tackle all together. So we want to play this role at the global level in the EU, and we really want to represent a best practice for the rest of the world. I don't know if I was enough satisfying for your question, but I think there is a lot to talk about this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you for kicking off the conversation. Minister Meza Murillo, let me come to you now. Does it make a difference to you that we have countries like Italy, who are, co-president of COP26, heading up G20, and, really prioritizing climate action? Will that impact countries like Costa Rica?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Sasha. And it's very good to hear all these framework that my colleague from Italy is saying. It's critical to generate trust. In this crucial moment where we are, it's critical to generate trust. As he was saying, in our region, for example, in the Central American region, we are receiving every year the impacts of hurricanes. Only last year, ETA and IOTA hit the region in less than 2 weeks. In a very small time frame, and they devastated the region. Almost 4 million people were affected only by ETA, and we can lose 2.5 million jobs in Latin America and the Caribbean due to heat stress towards the year 2030. And if we continue seeing all the devastation that these different events are creating in our economies, in our societies, including, of course, death, it is very sad, and it is a critical situation where we are. So this is a very important moment where we need to see ambition, in the climate goals, and where we need to see the big emitters committing and fulfilling their commitments. And of course, climate finance is a critical element to do the transformational change that we need to do in the region, in the different countries. And of course, when we talk about these means of implementation of climate finance, it is also important to understand that it is not only the 100 billion commitment, which I think is critical, but we need to also think in the alignment of the whole financial system. We need to green the whole financial system, because the transformational change that it is required will need also the mobilization of public and private finance as well. And we need to generate coherence, enabling conditions, and start with to prioritize what are the kind of investments that we want to see and what are the kind of investments that are not aligned with the Paris goals.
Now, let me come to that point about public and private finance. And this is an open question to anyone in the panel who feels that they could answer. I mean, to what extent can we expect public climate finance to address these issues? Or should we be looking to mobilize private capital? Where do you see the solution?
Is that question for me?
Monika.
Gladly. This question needs to be solved. Yeah, I gladly jump in because this question needs to be solved by all the partners that are at stake here. And that means that, of course, a certain responsibility is with private sector, but also a major responsibility is with public sector. If you're asking me how the world has to act on climate and on adaptation and mitigation at the same time, really all of the partners need to be involved. So we need political commitment at the highest level. We need champions like countries that are stepping forward and are showcasing how it can be done and that it can be done. But we also need private sector champions, and actually many more in the private sector to come on board, not only to lower emissions, so not only to mitigate, but also to help to adapt communities. And often great instigators, agitators, if you wish, are NGOs. And you need them as well. You need civil society. And every individual can contribute. And I don't shy away if individuals are turning to me and ask, can I do something? Absolutely. Even within your small vicinity, doing the recycling in the Western world, changing your energy efficiency of your own household in every aspect, whatever you do contributes to the betterance of exactly the globe. And I want to quote again what our State Secretary of Italy has already said. It's about people, prosperity, and the planet, and leaving no one behind. Everyone has to contribute.
Absolutely. Minister Meza Murillo, let me get your perspective on the public-private split. How are you seeing that split? Are people putting their money where their mouth is? And also, does the pandemic mean that, public funds are not so readily available for this now?
Absolutely. I would say public money, it's critical. And normally when we talk about this mobilization of money in terms of cooperation, normally it's a catalyzer, but it is not enough. We know that we also need to mobilize private money, as we are hearing. And one other important element is that we also need to mobilize our own resources at the national level as well. We really need coherence, because this, as I was saying, the kind of investments, the transformational change that we need to see will not happen only with cooperation money. But of course, in these critical times that we are facing, we need extreme solidarity. So it's, yes, of course, we need to mobilize this public money, but at the same time, as I was saying, we need to generate these enabling conditions so we can be mobilizing also private money. And at the end, it's about coherence. One thing that we need to really see is that, of course, we are going to be implementing good projects in adaptation, in mitigation, but if for example, with foreign investments, we're doing and investing in activities that are destroying nature, that are destroying, that are not aligned with the Paris Agreement, that we're not going in the right pathway. So I think that's why, as I was saying, this is about greening the whole financial system and being coherent and generate coherence in the whole system. And the other element that I think is so critical is that right now the numbers are clear. We are mobilizing more money for mitigation, and it's critical also to mobilize more money for adaptation. And these are facts, and we need to do more to, compensate these elements here.
Absolutely. Talking about coherence, Mwandwe, I'd love to bring you into the conversation, because I understand that Global Citizen launched a recovery plan for the world earlier this year, which includes strong calls to action for increased international climate financing from wealthy countries. What progress have you had with that plan? What was the reaction to that?
Thank you, and thank you for having me on this discussion. I think it's very important, and just to pick up on what the minister was saying in terms of thinking about, we have raised the financing and financing going to mitigation, but we also need to be speaking about financing going to adaptation. And it's true that as Global Citizen, we launched our recovery plan in February, emphasizing the critical steps that we must take as a globe to come out from this pandemic. And part of those steps also include protecting the planet and ending hunger. So in terms of what you're saying, I think that it's also very critical in terms how do we think about where the money is going? And so for us, we've had this campaign over the past 1 year where we've also had a very critical focus on smallholder farmers. Just a bit of background, I spent most of my formative years living on a farm. My father is still a smallholder farmer. I've managed to visit programs in Ghana and Sierra Leone where I've actually seen what smallholder farmers do, and it can't be overstated the kind of calamity that extreme weather events cause on these communities. These small farms which produce food and employment for some of the world's poorest and the most vulnerable people, that the way that they're being affected is already so evident. Their ability to access extension services, climate resilient crops, literally could mean the difference between them skipping meals or being able to thrive and them being able to support their families. And this is very important when we speak from the context of financing, that while we are increasing this, a very small fraction of the money that's being raised is being targeted to these rural communities and smallholder farmers. So how do we also think about ensuring that the people who are bearing the burden, as the Undersecretary had referred to, are also central to this topic? I think this is something that is key to what we identified in our recovery plan and as an overall piece that we should be thinking of. Over the last year, because of this, we've had global citizens really speaking up. They've signed petitions. We've had thousands of people who've sent in notes about why they care about this topic. And I think just a great point that Monika had raised is that individual action is also what spurs change. And we think that our global citizens who have been taking these actions, that it actually results in increased financing, but also financing that targets these communities that are at the center of this conversation.
Absolutely.
May I come in here as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Monika.
Because I want to add to what Mwandwe said, that at the Ban Ki-moon Center, we too thought, what can we do for this very important issue? And we are partnering with Global Citizen, and we are partnering also with the Global Center on Adaptation to elevate agricultural adaptation to the political spectrum globally, to get more political commitments and more financial commitments. And we do that with the convening power of Ban Ki-moon himself, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. And why do we do it? Because literally we are dependent in the world, in the food system of the world, on smallholder farmers. Many of them are women, many of them don't have a voice at the table. And many of them are not climate resilient yet. They don't have the means to conduct smart agriculture, smart climate resilient agriculture. So they need support, and they need support from top down, but also from bottom up. And this is the reason that we are engaging with very strong partners in this year where the eyes of the world are on us and our ambition on climate change. And I can only say thank you to the leadership of Italy and thank you to the leadership of the UK, who with the G7, the G20, and also the upcoming COP26 can really make a change.
Okay. And actually, this is a point I'd like to address. And Undersecretary Stefano, what would you see as a good result from COP26 in the context of what we're discussing now?
Well, first of all, I will really love to see that everyone is coherent with the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And then, obviously, we would like to bind a new agreement on a 2050 target. We in Italy, we are looking at 2050 as a target for the carbon neutrality. I'm not pretending that everyone could agree on that, especially when I think about the emerging countries. But I think that bringing them at the table and asking them to get some more commitment on that target could be a good starting point. And obviously, we have to come together with the financing program for that, because as was already said by other speakers today, it is important to be coherent between what you say and what you really do in terms of finance. So I'm very glad on this point to say that Italy is really committed. Nowadays, nobody knows maybe, but we are the first country in Europe for recycling percentage on our waste circle. I mean, we have a 79% of recycling system. We have just created with the new government a new ministry that is the ecological transition ministry. So it is looking at all the activity of the other ministries to be coherent with this target that we gave ourselves. Or, for example, the 30% of our recovery plan, 200 billion, is on ecological transition. So this is to be coherent, and obviously we will try to be coherent until we achieve the results.
Absolutely. Minister Meza, Murillo, your thoughts on that? What would be a successful outcome from COP26 for you?
It's a package. We need to complete the negotiations on transparency on Article 6, but we also need concrete results on finance and especially on finance for adaptation, as we are seeing today. And I will say that it's not only about commitments, it's about action. And I think that this is a critical decade for action. We don't have that much time. We really need to mobilize those resources and make those resources get to the territories and to the most vulnerable population, countries, regions. And I think that this is something that we really need to address as a global community. What we are seeing is this element of access to climate finance. There are a lot of obstacles, especially to the less developed countries, and that we really need to discuss, have an open and frank conversation. How can we enhance access to climate finance, and particularly, again, on adaptation elements? And just let me, a brief comment here. It's incredible the good work that the Adaptation Fund is doing in a lot of the countries. And I will say that sometimes it's about scale and about not having so much complexity, and the different facilities that we have play different roles. But I think that when we're talking about adaptation, this element of a scale, it's so important.
Absolutely. Monika, you were nodding a lot there. Would you like to come in on that?
I believe that the wish list for COP26 and also the G7 and G20 meetings are sheer endless. But one crucial bit is we need to fulfill the level of ambition that we have already set ourselves in the Paris Climate Agreement. That would be sort of the common denominator. Hopefully step up that ambition and not see the area of mitigation and adaptation as competing, but rather as a win-win situation. It's not that one area should take money from the other, but rather we need to step up the game and scale on both sides. And what we have seen with the pandemic, if there is political will, there is a way. We find the money, we do invest the money once it's absolutely needed. And I think, fortunately, thanks to academia, thanks to more knowledge, awareness around the globe, we know that that phenomenon, the climate action that is needed, is exactly such a phenomenon where the world needs to come together to really shift the needle for the survival of the planet. We have one planet, Planet A. We don't have a Planet B. And we have one plan, Plan A, and that's the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement. We don't have a Plan B.
I would like to jump in to say that it's the Paris Agreement, but it's also very important of being systemic about the other Rio conventions. It's also about protecting nature as part of this deal and also addressing desertification. And I think that we are seeing more of this integrated approach, but nature needs to be also part of this solution, and it's normally part of the livelihoods of a lot of these communities around the world.
A question to the group. What do you think has changed? We've talked for a number of years about how this is the critical decade for climate change. This is the time to take action. The time is now. What is going to change to ensure that action is actually taken?
If I may step in here, Sasha, I think that what we've seen in the last 2 years is that the power of movements has also made this issue very real for us, that for the first time, seeing thousands of people come out and speak about this issue, that it really signifies what it means to a lot of people. And I think that that has been a tipping point. But I'm also inspired by some keywords that have come out from this discussion. One of them was scale, which the minister mentioned, that we won't be able to create change if we don't take it to scale. Another point that the Undersecretary raised was coherence, that we are able to actually have coherence across all of these different plans that we've put for ourselves, the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, ensuring that this, what we've started on the food systems, that also comes to fruition. I think that kind of those keywords really stood out. What I think will need to happen is that we all need to work together. From these conversations and what has been happening over the past year, we know that the solutions are before us. What is now required is the action.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to react to that? Minister? Why is the time now? What is so crucial about it?
I feel optimistic because I see that we are addressing this with more of this whole of a government approach. It is not only about the ministers of environment, and we're seeing these at the different levels, and also this whole of society approach. And I think that this is something different from previous years. I think that there is more action with this systemic approach of whole of a government and whole of society approaches. And I think that this will be a catalyzer of more action. And yes, we need these international commitments, but then we need national and local actions aligned with these commitments as well. And I think that we are seeing a huge movement from the private sector, from the financial sector, and these are good signs.
Do you think possibly also the pandemic has been a force in focusing people on how important climate is and how we can actually mobilize on a global level to achieve a united goal?
Absolutely.
Monika.
I think that this has touched us all and has shown us the fragility and how important it is also, again, as I was saying, our relationship with nature again. And that this COVID was a crisis, but we have, climate and biodiversity, and these are huge systemic crises that will be, putting us in a lot of problems in terms of everything, our welfare, our economies, everything.
Yeah. Undersecretary Stefano, are you optimistic about the future?
I'm always optimistic because I do what I can to achieve the result, and there is only a way to be optimistic, to act in that direction. Otherwise, it's just words. I think that we need three different things. One is to create at the national level the coordination to act under the umbrella of the target that you set for yourself. The second one is to be binding on the target for the global fora, so United Nations and G20 and so on, and European Union. And the third one is to put a lot of money on the table by the rich countries to help the poor country to evolve. There is no way to pretend that the poor countries can skip their own moment to utilize nature as we did for the last decades, until we don't give them some money to have a different strategy to achieve the result that they want in terms of development. So that's what I think. I act in this direction. We as a government do the same, and I'm really proud to say that today.